Breaking news, CNN learning that former Trump national security official Kash Patel appeared for several hours before the grand jury in the Mar-A-Lago classified documents case. You got to keep this track. There's multiple grand juries. This one in the Mar-A-Lago case. Patel is a Trump loyalist. He has publicly defended the former president every chance he gets, even making this claim about some of the documents that were found at Trump's Florida residence.
In December and January on the way out, I witnessed him declassify whole sets of documents.
Caitlin Polance broke the story and is out front. And Caitlin, you're now learning also about how intense the grand jury's investigation is becoming. And I guess I should take a step back and say a lot of people may not have even realized there's a Mar-A-Lago grand jury going on, right? You hear about other places, but that there is a grand jury here and it is becoming more intense. What do you know?
Aaron, there's lots of grand jury activity. So last week, our reporting team at the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., we noticed Kash Patel there. He was there all morning at the courthouse, and he was, we can confirm now, speaking to a grand jury under a subpoena demanding information it's part of the Mar-A-Lago investigation. So not the January 6th investigation where we've heard a lot of grand jury activity around that. This is the Mar-A-Lago investigation, obstruction of justice, mishandling of federal records potentially. And what this shows is that the Justice Department is still looking at witnesses and potentially criminal charges in this probe. Now, Kash Patel, he's not just anybody in this. He is a person who's very close to Donald Trump. He's an advisor. He's a former administration official with the Defense Department, with the national security community. Even this summer, he was appointed the liaison to the National Archives for Donald Trump. Right. And he's been publicly out there saying that he wants documents declassified that Trump doesn't want to have keeping secret. So he's a very significant individual. This is a very significant step, and it confirms that the grand jury is active and pulling in people to this grand jury now.
All right, Caitlin, thank you very much. And that's what, boots on the ground reporting does, right? They see him there and they figure out why. Out front now, Ryan Goodman, co-editor-in-chief of Just Security and former special counsel at the Defense Department. So, Ryan, obviously they're there outside that courthouse. They're watching. They see Kash Patel go in. So they figure this out, that this is going on. This is the grand jury in the Mar-A-Lago case. What does it mean to you when you hear Kash Patel is there for such an extended period of time?
So I think it does mean that it's not just like heating up, but they're actually going after somebody in Trump's inner circle when it comes to the Mar-A-Lago documents. And just as described, he really is the front player for Trump. And he's been out there making these statements about like Trump's motive was to publicly release some of these documents. So to get somebody like that under oath, under penalty of perjury of law, and to say to them, was that the plan? When you made those multiple statements over multiple times that Trump's idea was to release it, is that the plan? Were you acting as his agent? Were you acting alongside him with that? That would be very damaging.
Right. And, amazing, because of course Trump has said all I had to do is think about documents. They've even claimed, gone so far as to claim what Kash Patel said about declassification. So that is obviously the Mar-A-Lago grand jury. Let's talk about Fulton County, the grand jury there. There's some big developments on that one. That's Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election in Georgia. Federal appeals court rules Lindsey Graham can be subpoenaed. And we know that could be significant because he made multiple calls to the Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, who had that 44-minute conversation with then President Trump, right, where he said, just get me 11,870 votes or 780 votes. And former Republican Senator Kelly Loeffler and former White House counsel Pat Cipollone have both testified. So we're learning all of those things. And this is long, but yesterday we reported on that federal judge who said there's evidence, there's an email that shows that Trump knew the Georgia data was a lie, and he signed under oath a legal document attesting to it anyway. So does this all lead to Trump himself now?
Absolutely. And I think two of the most significant ones are the Cipollone testimony and then also the federal judge, both of them going at the lawyers. Because we do know from Cassidy Hutchinson that Cipollone apparently tells Mark Meadows and Giuliani that their plan of the false slate of electors is illegal. And then that's part of what the district attorney is investigating and criminally investigating. And then the judge is actually handing Fani Willis another piece, which you just described, which is a lawyer actually saying Trump should not be saying this or signing this document because he knows it's false. He's been made aware that it is false. Yeah. And that's also just handing it off to the district attorney.
And just quickly before we go, Trump adding another lawyer, Harmeet Dillon, also represents other January 6th witnesses. What does that say that he's adding to his team?
I think it's about the subpoena from the January 6th committee, but it's unclear which way it plays. It might mean it because he's going to try to fight the subpoena, but it also might mean that he's saying that he wants to actually go before the committee and use the platform, and then he wants a lawyer that will assist him in doing that.
All right. Well, that of course, I know there's some who speculate that, and that may be the spectacle that he wants. All right, Ryan, thank you. And next, the Democrat running for governor in Arizona will not debate her opponent, and Republican Kari Lake has made it right now the absolute centerpiece of the entire campaign. And Biden in Pennsylvania hoping to help Senate candidate John Fetterman defeat Dr. Oz. This is a very competitive race. Is the president's presence a liability or benefit? Tonight, an Arizona voter and his wife allegedly filmed and photographed as they tried to use a ballot drop box this week. This is according to a voter intimidation complaint, which is now in the hands of the Department of Justice. The complaint specifically says the group accused the couple of, quote, being a mule. This is important because it's a likely reference to a voter fraud conspiracy film about so-called mules who were hired to stuff drop boxes with potentially fake absentee ballots in the 2020 election. Kyung La is out front.
Outside the Maricopa County Elections Department, a small group of people is gathering, watching, and recording as voters return early ballots at this drop box and election workers enter and exit.
They're taking pictures of them, and regardless of what the intent is of these people who are taking pictures of our elections workers, they're harassing people, they're not helping further the interests of democracy.
To be clear, there's nothing illegal about standing 75 feet away from a ballot drop box on a public street. But at another drop box in Maricopa County, a voter filed this complaint that alleges a group of people filmed and photographed the voter and his wife as they tried to vote, accusing them of being a mule, taking photographs of their license plate and following them to the parking lot. The voter intimidation complaint filed with the Arizona Secretary of State, Katie Hobbs, who is also running for governor, has been referred to the Department of Justice and Arizona Attorney General's office for investigation. This complaint comes in a state that never stopped chasing conspiracies about the 2020 election. From the multi-million-dollar and problem-plagued partisan review of Maricopa County's ballots to 2022 with the rise of the Trump-backed candidates like Republican nominee for governor Kari Lake. She's among a full slate of statewide candidates who have denied the truth about the 2020 election. When asked about the complaint about voter intimidation, Lake said she had not heard about it, then added this.
This is another reason we have to restore integrity. We can't have half of the population or more doubting our elections. It's not impossible to restore honesty and integrity to our elections, and I assure you when I'm governor, we will do that.
Lake says this even as there is no evidence of widespread election fraud. Joining her in sowing doubt about the election, Blake Masters, Republican U.S. Senate nominee. In the primary, Masters said this in a campaign ad.
I think Trump won in 2020.
That helped him win Trump's endorsement. In the general election, Masters has shifted his stance, saying he hadn't seen evidence it was stolen. But then, just last week at a political event, when asked about election integrity, Masters replied,
and a lot of people saw things that they did not like in 2020, to put it mildly. And so we're going to have an army, have a lot more eyes and ears and boots on the ground this time.
You may have noticed standing next to Kari Lake is Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin. He is someone who won the governorship in Virginia by keeping Trump at arm's length. Lake has fully embraced Trump. So what do they have in common? They want to win. And Lake wants to stand next to a winner. It is what Tudor Dixon wants. It is why Youngkin is heading there in Michigan. But then he's heading to Georgia to campaign with Brian Kemp, who also kept Trump at a distance and has famously battled with him. Aaron, what they all have in common is they all want to win. Aaron?
Kyung, thank you very much. Interesting, the star power of someone like Kari Lake and also Glenn Youngkin, certainly in national Republican politics. Out front now, Bakari Sellers, former Democratic member of the South Carolina House of Representatives, and conservative radio host Eric Erickson, of course, the host of the Eric Erickson Show. Okay, a lot to talk about here, and I do want to ask about Glenn Youngkin. But first, Bakari, this issue with the mules accusation, this ballot drop box issue in Arizona. We're only about 2 weeks away from Election Day, 2.5. How worried are you that this is just the beginning and that things are going to get a lot nastier and uglier?
I mean, things will get a lot nastier, things will get a lot uglier, but I'm not worried. I mean, the fact is, people oftentimes throughout history have had to overcome obstacles. Blake Masters and Kari Lake have absolutely no backbone. The reason that they're very popular in MAGA land and with the Republican Party right now is that they stand for absolutely nothing. And for them to say they're patriots, or for them to say that they're pro-democracy, or for them to even say that they stand with the United States of America, it's oxymoronic to say the least. The fact is, these individuals who are running for office right now are unqualified to hold any seat. And yes, they're going to put a militia on the ground, and yes, they're going to use voter intimidation. But I really believe that voters in Arizona are willing to overcome all of those things to elect people who deserve to be in office. And Kari Lake and Blake Masters simply are clowns who do not deserve to be in office because fundamentally they don't stand for anything. All they want to do is win.
Which may be true. I mean, there's many who would say that that's what most politicians want. I guess to that point, Eric, what Kari Lake seems to have is energy and star power. Is that enough?
She's got energy and star power, and she's also got 4 of the last 5 polls in Arizona showing her winning. So yeah, she's definitely doing something right out there. Katie Hobbs's refusal to debate her just reinforces that there's something Hobbs is scared of. I think, I wasn't a big fan of either of the Republican candidates on the ground in Arizona in the primary, but Kari Lake has shown herself to be a very adept politician with years of media training, being in the media, and it's certainly working to her advantage.
So, Bakar, I want to ask you about what he just mentioned, though. Eric just mentioned the debate, the lack thereof, right? Katie Hobbs, right at the original part of when she started running, was hailed as a hero by Democrats across the country because she stood up to Trump's efforts to overturn the election, right? She counted the ballots fairly in the state of Arizona. But now, even many Democrats are criticizing her for refusing to debate Kari Lake. And Kari Lake has made this, right now, the centerpiece of her campaign. I mean, just look at her Twitter feed, right? She calls Hobbs out for this every chance she gets. Here she is.
Why is it that Katie Hobbs will not debate? What is she trying to keep from you? What is she hiding? The people of Arizona will never support and vote for a coward like Katie Hobbs who won't show up on a debate stage. I'm doing a debate on Sunday. I'm inviting Katie Hobbs to show up on Sunday. I hope she will. I hope you'll show up. Did somebody say chicken? I didn't say that. Somebody said it.
How much has this refusal to debate hurt Hobbs, Bakari?
Very much so. I mean, it's a bad decision. I don't know who's advising her. I'm pretty sure the DGA, and if the DGA is advising her, then somebody needs to be fired. I mean, it's a terrible decision to make. I mean, you should get on the stage with people who do not deserve to be elected to office. There's no reason why you cannot out-debate Kari Lake. She stands for nothing. She waffles. She's adiaphora. She's a fence sitter. I mean, there's nothing she stands for. She does not deserve to represent the citizens of Arizona. And Katie Hobbs needs to stand on stage for an hour or an hour and a half, take the questions, take whatever criticism there is, but blast her opponent and let people know what she stands for and why her opponent does not want to be there. The decision not to debate, me and Eric don't agree on much. In fact, Eric still calls me Bacardi, which we're going to have to deal with later. But the fact is, we do know that, it's okay, I still love you, Eric. We do know that she needs to debate, and that's something we both agree on.
All right, so Eric, you heard what Kyung La said about Governor Youngkin. He has had glowing praise for Kari Lake. He shows up with her on the campaign trail yesterday. Here's what he said.
You need a fighter, and you've got one. That's what you've got. You need a leader who's going to understand that she works for you, and let me tell you, I think you should hire her.
Okay, Eric, here's the thing. The one thing that she really has stood for and been very vocal about, right, one of them nationally, right, has been that she denies the integrity and the 2020 election. Okay? That is something that Glenn Youngkin has vocally been on the other side of. I mean, so he said that about Kari Lake. You got to hire her. She's so amazing. He's also said these things.
Joe Biden was legitimately elected our president. I mean, he took the oath and was sworn in.
I said there wasn't material fraud, and I believe that the election was certifiably fair.
So, Eric, how can he back Kari Lake?
Well, I mean, trying to make politicians consistent over time with what they stand for when they all just want to win is kind of a losing battle here. I mean, to Bakari's point earlier on the Lake isn't fit to serve and she's not qualified and the like, the problem here is I think Democrats really do care about January 6th. They care about the election nihilism. I actually care about it. I think they're wrong and that 2,000 mules nonsense is garbage and left a lot of people in lurch with some madness that needs to be overcome. But at the same time, you've got a really bad economy. You've got all these other issues out there that Republicans have focused on in closing. And voters care way more about the price of gas and groceries than they do the 2020 election, more so than any of us do. And that's what's winning these elections. And Glenn Youngkin wants to be tied to that because that's why he got elected.
Right. And Glenn Youngkin may have much bigger ambitions. So he wants to get everybody on his side. All right. Thank you both very much. And next, in one of the biggest battleground states, voters say they are ready for a change.
In the past, I was independent and I would vote on either side, but it's become clearer and clearer that I need to vote democratically.
Tonight, President Biden departing Philadelphia just moments ago after raising money for Pennsylvania Senate candidate John Fetterman. The president going after Fetterman's opponent, Dr. Mehmet Oz, questioning if Oz stands for anything. Biden is hoping to boost Fetterman's chances. This is one of the most competitive Senate races in the United States. And Jessica Dean is out front now. She is live in Philadelphia. Jessica, Biden has kept a very light campaigning schedule so far. Some candidates, frankly, have kept their distance and not really wanted him to come. This is not the case for Fetterman. He wanted Biden there. He came. What kind of reaction did he get tonight?
Well, Aaron, you'll remember that all during the 2020 campaign, Biden was here all the time as the Democratic nominee, and that has continued throughout his presidency. So it wasn't a surprise that he would come back here to Philadelphia, of course, a Democratic stronghold, to help John Fetterman as he tries to become the next senator from Pennsylvania. This was a private closed-door fundraiser and reception, so it wasn't a big rally. We didn't get to see them out with a crowd or anything like that, but it was certainly an opportunity for Fetterman to be seen with the president. We typically see him, of course, in his signature hoodie and shorts, and this time we saw him in a suit. He flew on Air Force One, so again, able to get that proximity to the president. And this is as this race continues to tighten here in the Commonwealth. It is very likely that it will determine who has control of the U.S. Senate. So there's a lot of eyes on this, a lot of pressure from both sides. And there are some key counties that both of the candidates have zeroed in on. They're what's called the collar counties. They're the suburbs right outside of here in Philadelphia. And they've got suburban women who are quite independent. Take a look.
I'm Dr. Oz. I approve this message.
As ads for the hotly contested Pennsylvania Senate race flood the airwaves in the final weeks of the campaign, it's the Philadelphia suburbs where women may end up deciding the outcome.
Oh, I am fired up.
The four so-called collar counties, the suburbs that surround Philadelphia, are home to some of the state's most affluent and educated female voters, and they have a big independent streak.
We know that these voters have moved in recent years towards Democrats, but they have a long tradition of voting for Republican candidates.
Most of the women we talked to have voted or considered voting for someone in both parties.
In the past, I was independent and I would vote on either side, but it's become clearer and clearer that I need to vote democratically.
In 2016, I realized that there needed to be a change. And so at that point, I decided that I was going to become a Republican.
Burwood Yost has studied Pennsylvania voter trends for years.
It's really going to be an interesting push-pull between these concerns that voters have about the economy and inflation, and then concerns about abortion rights.
In Bucks County, Pennsylvania, women we spoke to named three key issues swaying their decision: the economy, crime, and abortion rights.
I'm voting based on our economy and based on the crime.
Sharon Jackson said the country is moving in the wrong direction.
I go to the grocery store and I'm like, oh my goodness, this cost me $250. Oz has more to offer to me, and I think that he has a lot more to offer to our state.
But for others, abortion rights remain top of mind, and they plan to vote accordingly.
John Fetterman. And why? Because I care about reproductive rights.
Is that the biggest issue for you?
It is. There's a lot of other issues, but right now I've become a single issue voter.
I'm afraid of the abortion issue. Whether or not my own personal opinions of that, it's nobody's business.
The candidates are targeting these suburban women in different ways.
John Fetterwoman.
Fetterman is leaning into the issue of abortion rights.
Women are the reason we can win. Don't piss women off.
While Oz released an ad this week emphasizing political moderation.
Extremism on both sides makes things worse. We need balance, less extremism in Washington.
Both campaigns signaling they understand the potential impact of these voters in a race where the result could determine control of the Senate. And we learned just tonight, that Fetterman's really doubling down on these collar counties, Aaron. He's going to be holding kind of a smaller, more intimate gathering with Senator Amy Klobuchar and Congresswoman Chrissy Houlihan. They're going to be talking about gun rights and abortion rights and gun safety and economic issues, things like that, as he really tries to really zero in on those voters, Aaron.
All right. Thank you very much, Jessica. And next, could Boris Johnson in Arizona allegedly filmed and photographed by a group accusing them of being a, quote, mule? Is this the beginning of a terrible and ugly election? Let's go out front. And tonight, I wouldn't let any of us out there. Those are the brutally honest words from a newly drafted Russian soldier sent to the front lines in Ukraine. In a phone call with his sister, the soldier revealing the pathetic state of Vladimir Putin's army. We feel it's important for you to hear his voice and to play this for you.
Whatever we wear here, we bought ourselves. They're forcing us to go on camera to encourage the mobilized not to be afraid to come out here and fight. We are spending up to 60 to 70,000 rubles on our own gear, and what they are giving us, the ammunition, cartridges, etc., are all rusty. I repainted the rifle they gave me just so you couldn't see the rust. We're buying everything. Soon they'll ask us to buy our own grenades. No one is supporting us. To be honest, I wouldn't let any of us out there. They give you blank ammo cartridges, which when shot simply fall to the ground. They trained us how to handle weapons, artillery, but they took the whole group just once to demonstrate how to use them. Half the group didn't understand. Some did. Whatever knowledge we have is thanks to what we've learned on our own.
Now, we can't independently verify the authenticity of that call, but you hear the damning details from the soldier himself, rusty rifles, buying their own grenades. He says half his group didn't even understand the next to nothing training they received. I mean, it's incredible. It's that I wouldn't let any of us out there. And I want to note something else this soldier said, because it's important in this context, because we have the whole conversation. He says he's not declining to fight. In fact, at one point he said, quote, "I'm happy to fight." This is not some anti-war dissenter who tried to flee mobilization. This makes his words, how damning and specific they are, perhaps even more damning, because the harsh reality he details is the polar opposite of the propaganda image and the lies that Putin puts out. Today, Putin making a rare visit to a military training center in Western Russia with his defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, by his side. Putin met with soldiers and visited a shooting range to do this. Firing a sniper rifle for show, for a photo, as the young Russian men he sends into battle are painting their guns to cover the rust. There he is, having a good time. Putin putting on this show as he's on the verge of broadening his war in two major ways. One, another possible invasion. There's increasing fear tonight from Ukraine that Russian soldiers will soon re-invade from the north through Belarus. A senior Ukrainian military official warns that Russian MiG fighter jets capable of carrying cruise missiles have been spotted on airfields in Belarus, and 10,000 Russian troops are in the country for training exercises. I want to note the last time the two countries held joint exercises was in February, and the days before the invasion. You're actually looking at exclusive video our Fred Pleitgen filmed at that time. Many of the Russian troops there went to invade Ukraine from the north to try to seize Kyiv. Now, the second way Putin is expanding his war tonight is bringing yet another country into it. Tonight, we've learned Putin isn't just buying drones from Iran, but he also may soon get Iranian missiles, say U.S. sources. And while Russia is denying using Iranian-made drones in recent attacks, the U.S. says there's abundant evidence there from Iran, with the country putting military members, Iranians, on the ground in Crimea to train Russian pilots.
The fact is this: Tehran is now directly engaged on the ground and through the provision of weapons that are impacting civilians and civilian infrastructure in Ukraine. In fact, that are killing civilians and destroying civilian infrastructure.
Yet even as Putin makes moves to make this war bigger, Ukraine continues to move the front line closer to Putin. Just look at this new drone video tonight. What you're looking at here is a Ukrainian rocket strike. It takes out a Russian convoy, which, as you can see, is trying to hide in a forest. This happened near Luhansk. At least 5 Russian vehicles were obliterated in that strike. Fred Pleitgen begins our coverage tonight. He is out front in Kramatorsk in eastern Ukraine. And Fred, Putin is finding more ways to escalate this war, even as when we hear the audio from that soldier, the military is woefully unprepared and faltering on the front line.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Aaron. And the Ukrainians believe that Vladimir Putin is trying to find even more ways to escalate things further if, in fact, his troops continue to get pushed back, especially down there in the Kherson region. In fact, tonight, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said the Ukrainians have information that the Russians mined a strategic dam on the Dnipro River, that if they burst that dam, it could flood an entire region, including 80 villages and the town of Kherson, and pose a serious threat also to the biggest nuclear power plant in Europe, the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Again, the Ukrainians are saying they're not going to allow this to hold them back. In fact, they continue to push that counteroffensive in the south. Here's what we're learning.
Spokeswoman for Russia's foreign ministry rejecting the allegations.
This is nothing more than a collection of unsubstantiated inferences and far-fetched assumptions that Britain and France are trying to build into a structure. And every time it all collapses in front of everyone.
But on Russian TV, this military expert and defense ministry advisor seemed to admit the origin of the drones, not realizing his mic was hot. He tells the host,
let's not shake the boat too much. We all know that they are Iranian, but the authorities did not admit that.
But the Russians are now admitting things are not going well on the battlefield. The top commander acknowledging his force's position in Ukraine's south is, quote, tense.
And Aaron, that's also one of the reasons why it could actually be quite significant that Vladimir Putin was seen today at that base, at that training place, together with his defense minister, together with Sergei Shoigu, because Shoigu has been under a lot of fire, especially by some of the other people who are involved on Russia's side, notably Chechen strongman Ramzan Kadyrov, but also the man who's actually pressing Russia's offensive where I am. That would be Yevgeny Prigozhin of the Wagner private military company. So there seems to have been a power struggle going on. Whether or not today means that Vladimir Putin still trusts Shoigu is certainly something that's up in the air, Aaron.
All right, Fred, thank you very much. Reporting on the ground from Kramatorsk. And as Putin and his defense chief met with those troops, and who knows, possibly plotting that possible attack from Belarus as the Ukrainians see it, we're covering both angles tonight. Retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Layton is standing by at the magic wall to show exactly why the map of that could be so different and so important than last time. First, I want to go to Douglas London, though, former CIA counterterrorism chief. He spent 3 decades in the CIA's clandestine service, pursuing and countering Russian intelligence officers, also a fluent Russian speaker. Thank you very much for being with me. He's also the author of The Recruiter, Spying and the Lost Art of American Intelligence. So, Doug, this image today, Putin with the sniper rifle, inspecting troops with the defense minister, Sergei Shoigu, in a very rare joint public appearance. What does this signal to you?
I think Fred had it right. Putin needs to show continued control, continued strength, and reflections that there's been squabbling among his inner circle, which clearly appears to be the case. As Fred noted, it was Prigozhin's media chief that the Russians recently arrested, and he was spearheading a lot of the online and media attacks against Shoigu. So by standing with Shoigu, with the Russian draftees and conscripts, he's demonstrating there's no daylight between us. We've got things under control. I'm in charge, and my people are behind me.
So, obviously not the truth, but that's the image he's putting out there. But let me ask you on this front, because there's something else I know that you pointed out. Putin recently named the commander of Russia's Air Force as the person in charge of the overall war in Ukraine, the ultimate commander. Now, he replaces an army general. And, of course, the Air Force, just states the obvious, Doug, is really not doing that much in Ukraine. You think that this is significant, that this Surovikin being the Air Force chief is significant? Why?
I don't think Putin makes any decision on a senior position without considering what does this do for me? What is the threat and what is the advantage? I don't think merit is really primary in his deliberations. So the current chief, he started out in the ground forces. He spent time there, and he went to the Air Force later in his career. But he wouldn't have the same network among the ground forces, folks who have the tanks, who have the guns. I mean, typically in Russian history, it's about storming the castle, right? If they're going to launch a coup. So an Air Force chief, he's going to probably be more challenged to do that and probably make Putin feel a little bit safer.
Which is interesting, though, when you point out, right, the Army would be what would be involved in a coup. So if he's putting in the Air Force, it's significant perhaps even to show his thinking. And in that front, Doug, you spent decades dealing with KGB, then the FSB. And now you write in this must-read article in Just Security, I hope everyone will read it, that you see multiple signs of what you say is, quote, infighting within Putin's court. So is Putin really at risk of a coup?
I think we're far away from a coup. I think there's certainly fissures, and fissures can grow worse depending on how things go on the battlefield, but more importantly, how things go internally. Folks in his inner circle have invested their lives literally in supporting him and standing with him and standing behind him. And there are those he needs to count on. He needs to count on his national security advisor, Nikolai Patrushev. He needs to count on Bortnikov, who's head of the FSB. People who really do make the difference in terms of his inner security. So if things get worse and he doesn't find some desperate means to seize control once again, there could be a problem for him down the road.
Yeah, it's just amazing to watch. And when you, as you say, when there are fissures, breaks there, they're there, and that's notable on its own. All right, Doug, thank you very much. And as Russia puts soldiers and weaponry inside Belarus, I want to talk to retired Air Force Colonel Cedric Leighton. So, Colonel Leighton, this comes from a senior Ukrainian military official who is saying publicly today that a Russian attack on Ukraine from Belarus, that they believe it can happen, they think it's likely, and that this time it would originate in the West, which is obviously very different from Russia's attack at the start of the war, which was on Kyiv. The West would be all the way over right by Poland. That senior Ukrainian official says that this all could be targeted at NATO supplies coming over those two main border crossings with Poland. And that obviously risks great escalation in this war. What is the significance of this?
So it's hugely significant, Aaron, and here's why. When you look at this border crossing point right here at Medyka, it's right on the Polish-Ukrainian border. This is where the volume of all the material that the Ukrainians get from the NATO countries, from the United States, from other countries, that all goes through that crossing point and a couple other crossing points, but that is one of the main ones right there. So when we dealt with the earlier invasion, we were talking about something that came down this way. But if we're dealing with something that would go into the West, which would basically be designed to cut things off, it would be coming in this way. And it would potentially serve to isolate Medyka from the rest of Ukraine. It would also cut them off from Poland, potentially, if it gets down far enough, Slovakia and Romania. So those are the kinds of areas that they would interdict, which means cut them off, and it would prevent possibly the effort to resupply the Ukrainian armed forces at the most critical juncture of their fight against the Russians.
Right, and obviously along that border, I mean, that's where so many Ukrainians fled, right? So you're going to have massive civilian impacts if such a thing were to occur, and the possibility of a direct conflict with NATO. Poland, right there, right? We've got a air base right near there as well on the Polish side. So I want to play again, Colonel, the sound that I played from that newly drafted Russian soldier detailing a shockingly unprepared military. This is a kid who says that he's happy to fight, but this is the problem, what he was handed. Here's the audio.
Whatever we wear here, we bought ourselves. They're forcing us to go on camera to encourage the mobilized not to be afraid to come out here and fight. We are spending up to 60 to 70,000 rubles on our own gear, and what they are giving us, the ammunition, cartridges, etc., are all rusty. I repainted the rifle they gave me just so you couldn't see the rust. We're buying everything. Soon they'll ask us to buy our own grenades. No one is supporting us. To be honest, I wouldn't let any of us out there. They give you blank ammo cartridges, which when shot simply fall to the ground. They trained us how to handle weapons, artillery, but they took the whole group just once to demonstrate how to use them. Half the group didn't understand. Some did. Whatever knowledge we have is thanks to what we've learned on our own.
Colonel, of course, we can't independently verify the authenticity of that call, although, of course, it seems to be authentic. What's your reaction to what you heard?
What a complete and utter disaster, and what a disservice to those troops. As a former commander and a former leader of soldiers and airmen and Marines and sailors, I looked at that particular tape and said that this would never fly in anything that I was a part of. So what it shows us is that the Russians are really not taking care of their troops. They're not resupplying them. They have a major problem with actually getting all of the things that they need to the front. And if those kinds of soldiers are coming to the front, they are definitely not ready to conduct movements like this, either the one that they did before, which targeted Kyiv, or the one that they're planning to do now, allegedly, which could potentially cut the west of Ukraine off from the rest of Europe.
All right. Colonel, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
You bet.
Sobering analysis. Well, next we have breaking news. We're learning that a top Trump ally appears before a grand jury in the Mar-A-Lago documents case. He is the man who made this wild claim.
The way out. I witnessed him declassify whole sets of documents.
Plus, the home of never-ending conspiracy theories now has a new problem tonight. Election intimidation in Arizona. Who is getting harassed and why? And President